Dr. Alex Del Carmen is joining me now on the Scott Sand Show. He's heads up the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. Dr. Del Carmen, it's always great to have you on the show.
Great to talk to you, Scott.
So, good news in the fact that the suspect in Highland Park, Illinois, is no longer at large. There were some tense hours yesterday after this tragic parade shooting in Highland Park. Now that we have a suspect in custody, the person who appears to be responsible for what happens, according to the task force spokesperson, this guy is in his early 20s, an aspiring rapper who made some violent videos, took pictures of himself in a Trump flag and footage of a pro-Trump protest, and had been described as friends as being a little off. I mean, this fits the profile to a T of what you might expect in a shooting incident like this.
That's exactly right. And so, unfortunately, across the United States and really across the world, we have people that fit this profile all day and night long, right? But they don't necessarily go out there and shoot somebody and start killing people, right? So, in the end, law enforcement has a challenge of being able to filter out those individuals that have the ability and the intent to carry out such attacks versus those individuals that are simply expressing their desire to do one thing or the other, but not necessarily carrying out anything specifically.
This guy apparently had run-ins with the police previously. They knew who he was once they got surveillance video capturing his face. Police in that area reportedly knew who he was. Is that a flaw in the system that doesn't take juvenile records into consideration as an adult?
Part of it is not necessarily a flaw in the system. It's just the fact that the criminal justice system as a whole, and law enforcement in particular, are incredibly overwhelmed with the information that is coming their way, right? So imagine being a local law enforcement entity where you're interviewing folks like these on a daily basis, right? So you're building up files, you're building up profiles of individuals, and who is to say, and who has the wisdom, the time, and the energy, and more than anything, the funding, right, to be able to have enough personnel to simply start using some sort of a predictability model that will show you which one is more likely to be triggered by something and therefore go on and attack innocent people. So I wouldn't say that it's a flaw. I would say that we need to have better systems to communicate. But I would caution the audience that, the more we give up in terms of our rights, the more likely we are going to be safe, but we are going to be giving up those rights as well.
Well, and that's one of the issues that many of us have with the wording of several states' potential red flag laws is that if you post a video like that, maybe you are an artist or rapper. I mean, I can't imagine myself putting out that kind of music and portraying myself in graphic videos like that, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe if I'm 20 years old and into that music scene and I'm an artist and I do that and all of a sudden I've got my guns confiscated until I can prove I'm sane, where this guy may have been justified. But there are people who will do that and cloak themselves in that veil of being an artist and really pose no violent threat to anyone.
Right. I mean, look, Scott, I'm almost 55 years old. I watch Frank Sinatra's, concerts and listen to his music, and I think anything that deviates from that is quote-unquote weird, but that doesn't mean that category of weird is going to simply engage in a violent act, right? Most artists are eccentric, and most people that are in a certain type of music are that way as well. That doesn't mean that they're going to be criminals. And so, again, the challenge is, how does law enforcement identify these patterns before they become reality and innocent people lose their lives? And that is going to be the million-dollar question that all of us are going to be facing in the law enforcement community in years to come, because I'm afraid that more and more of these acts are going to take place.
We're talking with Dr. Alex Del Carmen, the head of the School of Criminology at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. Dr. Del Carmen, when you look at the way the suspect was apprehended, does this create the problem, the illusion that he was successful in his act and spur copycats? If we stop naming these shooters and giving them attention to this so-called art, to his music videos, to whatever his other manifestos may be, is that an alluring detail for other would-be violent attackers?
Right. So I think that the media carries a responsibility, right, not to make the shooter more infamous than they already are, while at the same time, perhaps focusing more on victims, as I think the media has done in the past few shootings. Unfortunately, what research does show across the nation is that within 30 days of one of these episodes taking place, we typically have another one. And whether you call them copycats or simply people get inspired, subconsciously to engage in these kinds of violent acts, we don't really know. But what we do know is that they typically follow one another. So we're bracing ourselves for the next one and praying that this is the last one that we'll see, at least in a while.
It's the Scott Sancho. Dr. Alex Del Carmen is on with me now. To shift gears a little bit, Dr. Del Carmen, I'm sure you've been following the story out of the city of Akron nearby to us. The curfew continues. The city of Akron is still under a lockdown from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. because the chief of police, the mayor of Akron, fear there may be more retaliatory violence after the body cam footage released this weekend of the shooting death at the hands of police of a 25-year-old, apparently unarmed, although the police claimed that he had shot at them earlier in the chase. Multiple officers opened fire and emptied their magazines on this man, shooting and killing him. Now that you've been able to review any of this body cam footage, does that change your perception of how this incident went down?
What's really hard about this incident is that we just really can't play Monday morning quarterbacking based on a very small, amount of information. But what appears to me, however, as somebody that's been training cops for 25 years and thousands of them, I can tell you that there is no justifiable constitutional reason why somebody should be shot 60 plus times, right? I mean, you can call it and you can explain it however you want to explain it in terms of the euphoria, the adrenaline flowing in the officers, bodies as they're chasing the suspect. But, look, officers are trained to be professional, to meet force with force that is quote unquote necessary and sufficient to stop the threat. This is clearly an overreaction on their part. And this is an issue with training, with culture of that police department. And I'm certain, in fact, that there will be many outside entities that are going to be interested in reviewing the patterns or practices of the department and then others in the area.
Aren't most officers taught to shoot until the threat is neutralized, and that often means emptying their magazines? Now you've got 6 other officers doing it around you. That becomes overkill. But I thought part of the training was to shoot until the threat's gone.
Yeah, but it's shoot till the threat is gone, but the training itself does not tell you how many bullets you have to put on a person's body, right? For the most part, we train officers to hit center mass because we know that the central nervous system resides there, and that simply disables the person and puts the person on the ground. Obviously, the individual's weight, the individual's volume, the angle in which the person is shot, all of those things matter in terms of being able to quote-unquote neutralize the threat. But there is no real training that I'm aware of that is constitutionally sound and that follows best practices that would simply tell officers to empty out their magazine in order to be able to stop the threat. However, we do tell them that they need to aim at center mass and stop the threat if they are, in fact, going to engage in lethal force.
How do you think the city of Akron is handling this so far? I mean, obviously, it's a tense town right now, but they've been as transparent as I think they can be in a reasonable amount of time.
I agree with that. I think that the chief has done a great job in being able to be transparent and demonstrate, the transparency of it all. And I do think that it's cautionary and perhaps it's almost textbook-like to be able to provide some sort of a limitation of what people can and cannot do after daylight hours because their safety is in peril. These are very, very difficult situations to handle, especially with a community that's rightfully so angry and ready to engage in protest across the board.
Head of the School of Criminology, Tarleton State University, Dr. Alex Del Carmen on the Scott Sancho. Dr. Del Carmen, always great to have you on to talk with you, sir.
Thanks for having me.